Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out investformore.com. Hi, everyone. It's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More. I'd like to welcome you to another real estate investing podcast. Today, I've got a great guest. Super excited to have Danny Johnson on the show. He is a house flipper, owns rental properties, does all kinds of stuff in the real estate world. So we're going to talk about how he got started, what he's doing now, and advice he's got for people who want to start flipping, get into rental properties, maybe even a little bit of wholesaling. So Danny, thank you very much for joining. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm doing great.
So first things first, you've been flipping houses about 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's about 12 now. I need to update some of my websites, but yeah,
Okay.
it's about 12 years now. I think that we've been flipping houses.
Cool. And you did software before that, right?
Right. So I went to college, got a degree in computer science, and went to work for a defense contractor in San Antonio and worked in an office without windows or anything, because it was defense contractor. So you've got the fluorescent lights that kind of burn into your brain. And, it was just, it was kind of miserable, and management wasn't very good at, keeping us very motivated and everything. It was just a really cruddy sort of job and wasn't anything like I expected when I went to school, like what I would be doing. And while I was there working that job, my father actually started flipping houses. And so, talking to him, it's like his whole life changed. He went from just kind of being a little bit miserable with what he was doing to being super pumped, excited. Like every day was an adventure, and just hearing all the stories and stuff like that. He was just, loving it. So, I'd go to trudge to work and sit there and, man, I wish I was out there with him doing all that stuff, So it was cool to watch him sort of grow in that. And, he was doing it for several years before I even started to try it out. And, so I asked him, I said, I want to get started with this. What should I do? And, a lot of people, when they hear my story, think, oh, well, he probably just told them do this, this, and this, and kind of like held him by the hand through all of it. But it really wasn't like that. It was more of, I'm here for when you have questions about things, but you kind of need to learn on your own and take action on your own. And when you come across something, then you call me and ask me. And I think a lot of mentors sort of handle things that way because there's so many people that want to get to the business, but like so few of them that will actually do all the work, and it takes quite a bit of work to get started. But so it was more of like, I was out on my own kind of learning and stuff like that and taking action. And, I just recorded an interview with him, my dad, the other day, but, I brought up a story whenever I got the first contract for a house. So my wife and I got a contract signed. Of course, my hand was shaking like crazy and everything. Couldn't even sign my signature very well, but it was so funny because we got the contract signed and went straight over to the title company. And I remember sitting in the parking lot of the title company and going, man, I don't know what I'm supposed to say when I go inside the title company, with the contract. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I've heard like get it under contract, take it to the title company, but I didn't know what to say or anything. So I called him up and was like, hey, I got this contract. And of course I had been telling him about the deal and stuff like that. So we talked a little bit, but, so I got to that point where I was like, I don't even know what to say when I go inside of this title company. And so, he had to tell me, well, go in there and tell them that you need to receive the contract. So that was kind of like the statement, I just need to go in and receive the contract and then give them the earnest money. And so it's kind of funny because you learn that kind of thing, but until you actually do it, you sort of, there's steps that maybe you forget about or whatever. But anyway, so that's an interesting story there. But he helped a lot whenever we needed, but we sort of went and did our own thing, my wife and I, because we're in San Antonio, which is a bigger market, and he does the small towns outside of San Antonio. So it's completely different markets. And, saw him having fun doing that. So we started doing it part-time. So evenings and weekends, we were just, as the kids said, and still say, that we're obsessed with houses. So we'd always drag them out and take them driving for dollars, where we look for, the vacant houses and write down the addresses and look up the, owner's information and send them a letter saying we wanted to buy their house. And so that's sort of how we started with bandit signs and with, driving for dollars and taking the kids out on the evenings and weekends. And, we were actually part-time for, I think it was about 3 years, because I didn't really enjoy my job so much, but that security, was there, and we got paid pretty well. So, it was a little bit tough for me to give that up, because we did make good money with flipping. But sometimes when it's not so, like it was always, the feeling of, what if I don't get any deals for 3 months or something? It's like you have that sort of worry even after you've done 20 deals sometimes. But, so it took about 3 years, and then we went full time. And I think, there was a huge benefit to being part-time for that long. And the biggest benefit from that is, I was forced to do the 20% of things that produced 80% of results, because I only had so much time, the evenings and weekends. So I was kind of forced to figure out, what can I do with the short amount of time I have that can get me the biggest results. So you really hone your systems and everything, and get to where you're being very productive with it. So that really helped for when I went full time. And it was funny, because I went out full time, I had that extra time, and I didn't know what to do with myself. It was kind of ridiculous. I felt like I could do everything I needed to in two hours, and the rest of the day I would just kind of feel like I needed to keep myself busy. So I was just wasting time doing things, spinning my wheels, that wasn't really doing much. So, it'd take 3 days to design a new business card, right? Stuff like that,
Tell me, your first flip. Now, I've interviewed quite a few investors and flippers, and it's probably 50% of them lost money the first deal they did. So did you make money on your first flip? How did that go?
Yeah, the first flip, we made $20,000 on a wholesale.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and it was actually a pretty crazy deal. And having a mentor really helped in this situation, because it was actually a really crazy story. It was actually probably one of the weirdest kind of deals that we did, and it was the first deal. But we sent out postcards, so we drove for dollars, right? We found this house that looked like it had fire damage. It was vacant and windows broke and stuff like that. So we wrote down the address, mailed the owner. They called us. They actually lived down the street from that house. We went in, and they said that they got the insurance money from the house being burned and went and bought another house. So they had this one, and I think they only owed a small amount. We made an offer to buy it. And it was actually a short sale, because they actually they didn't owe a small amount. They owed quite a bit, and we couldn't offer anywhere near what they owed on it. And the numbers were something like where I think they owed maybe 70 something, and we were offering something crazy like 25,000 or 30,000 or something like that, I think it was. And because this place was burned, I mean, it would be a big rehab job. So anyway, we made the offer. They accepted the offer, and we went into doing a short sale. And, the bank, I think it was Citibank or somebody, but they agreed to the short sale at that lower amount. Well, for some reason, the sellers, once they found out that we were going to be able to buy it from the bank for that much, got mad, because they weren't able to just pay it off at that small amount. And so they were all of a sudden saying, well, we're not going to close. They hadn't made a payment on the house in almost a year, I think it was.
And they used their insurance money to buy another house instead of paying the bank back. So. Right.
And so, so it was crazy. And of course, the lender was like, I was actually surprised they hadn't foreclosed on them yet. It'd been like a year, and didn't use the insurance money to fix the place up. So they weren't going to close. And it's like, well, we just did all this work. The lender wants to get rid of this thing, and we want to buy it. The seller won't do anything about it. And so I don't know whose idea it was. I think it was actually the lender. It was like, the big company, the big bank, Citibank or whoever it was, had contacted us and said, hey, look, why don't we sell you the note, at the price you were wanting to, short sale the house at. And so we would get the note. And then, of course, from there, we would foreclose. And some people might look at that and say, well, it's kind of, it's like, well, they didn't make payments for a year. It's like, it's amazing they still hadn't been foreclosed from the lender. So, okay, they didn't keep their part of the bargain. Let's just, do that. And so we bought the note for $25,000, I think it was. And the thing was, like the lender actually waited until the day we were closing on it to tell us, hey, oh, by the way, we don't actually have the physical note because that was from another bank that we bought. All we can give you is an affidavit that we once had the note.
Oh, wow.
And so there was like, whoa, I don't know about this, So this was like, we're going to pay for an affidavit basically that there was a note. So this is why they probably never foreclosed, for that 1 year. Well, I think while we were doing that, another investor had contacted us, and I forgot how he had found out about it, that we were, working on buying that house. I think maybe they had talked to the seller, and the seller said, well, we were dealing with them or something. I don't know how it happened, but I think it was an attorney or something. He called and said, hey, I want to buy that house, because he wanted to fix it up and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, okay, well, great. We'll go ahead and how much are you going to offer? And I forgot how much it was, but I think it was like 50,000. And so since it was going to be just pay it off, we'd be able to do the release of lien, and he would never, that it was an affidavit of a note didn't matter. So we went ahead and did bought the note. I forget how exactly everything worked out, but it was ended up being where it didn't matter that we just had the affidavit, and, it all worked out where he bought it, and we ended up, getting the wholesale deal for about 20,000 after all the fees and stuff. I don't know if anybody was able to follow that really. But.
Well, what's crazy is that a big bank like that would just offer to sell you the note. I don't think that would happen in today's world, but
right, yeah.
There's so much regulation and so much going on with the note sale and different. But yeah, that's of course they didn't have the physical note. Maybe that's why they were so motivated to get rid of it. Did you start out doing mostly wholesale deals, or how soon did it take before you did a first real flip and started doing the remodel and rehab and all that?
All right. So that one took probably, I think it was about 6 months before, once we started driving around sending letters. It was something like 4 or 6 months before we got that one. And then after that deal, that one, maybe even while we were still messing with that deal, within that month, I think we had the next property, which is one that we did fix up and flip. And that one was a very light rehab, thank goodness. And it was basically just paint and carpet, So we bought the house and fixed it up, just paint and carpet. And it was funny, the paint colors we picked back then, because we just said, well, I don't know what color we should paint it. Let's just drive around the neighborhood and look for other ones. And so we just painted it white with like this forest green trim or something, something I'd never pick now. But, we painted it that. And then the next couple rehabs after that, we painted the same thing just because we had already decided on it. But so that was the first one that we actually fixed up and flipped. And then the next one came pretty soon after that. And that was actually another burn house that we decided to go ahead and fix up and flip. And so that was a ton of work. I think after that one, I didn't really want to do any more burn houses, but there's just so much. I mean, you're basically rebuilding a whole house.
Right. And when you're doing those, were you doing the work yourself? Were you hiring a contractor? How'd you start out?
Right. So I never did the work because, my father always told me don't.
Smart.
Plus, we didn't have time. We had full-time jobs. So I was just forced to find a contractor that would have their own crew that they managed. And so I was just dealing with the contractor, so a general contractor. And that burn house, the second fix and flip that we did, it actually worked out really nice. Now, I got a little bit lucky because while I was there looking at the house, I was so new. I didn't even really know how to figure out like all that cost of all the stuff with the house being burned and having to replace everything to determine a good repair value on the thing. And while I was there looking at the house, the contractor actually pulled up and got out and started talking to me. And I said, "Can you fix something like this?" And he said, "Yeah." And he walked around and I got the bid from him for the job, sort of just a rough, idea of what it was going to be. And then I made my offer based on that. And we got the house and I hired him and he did the whole house. And so we got really lucky that worked out and that he did a good job and wasn't a crook because I didn't know who he was or check out references or anything. But
that worked out well.
Oh, yeah.
You went full time about 3 years. How many flips do you think you're doing a year when you felt comfortable going full time into real estate? And were you doing wholesale deals still too, or were you just doing flips? How did that work out?
Yes. See, the wholesale deals were basically ones that we didn't want to fix and flip. So, just kind of depended on where we were. If we had, 3 rehabs going already, it's sort of like the next one would end up just being a wholesale because we just had too much going on. So if it was in a part of town that I didn't like being in because they were dangerous or something, that would be an automatic wholesale. And then if we just had too much going on, we'd end up wholesaling. But to answer your question, though, when we went full time, honestly, I don't remember how many a year we were doing because we weren't really counting them by year. Typically in the pipeline, like of pipeline of having contracts of houses to buy, in the process of rehabbing, in the process of selling already rehabbed homes, we were always basically between about 12 and 15 properties.
Oh, nice.
So just always sort of overlapping, and it seems like that was always like where we were on the whiteboard that we had of all the properties and what we were doing with each of them.
You've always been kind of a direct marketing to find your deals, kind of off market. Have you ever used MLS, or has it always been just kind of you with bandit signs or drive for dollars trying to find those properties?
Yeah, I've used MLS, but I've never been big on using MLS just because it's so, it's sort of the lower hanging fruit, and with that comes all that competition. And so when I found like the best use of my time was to just do the direct marketing to motivated sellers. And, I just got so tired of going, like I'd spend all day and look at like 10 properties. Maybe I wasn't doing it right for one thing, but I look at 10 properties off the MLS, figure out offers and make offers that same day. And every single time I called the agent to make the offer, it was like, well, get in line. There's about 12 other offers, submit your highest and best. And I just got so sick of that. It's like, it's a waste of time for me. But, whenever we built relationships with agents and we found out about properties that were being listed right away and being able to get the offer in really quick, it worked out pretty well. But and that worked better when it was, the market after 2008, when everything kind of tanked and a lot of the competition went by the wayside. So there wasn't so much competition. It was easier to buy them off the MLS, but that didn't last very long, maybe 2-3 years. And then it's back to motivated sellers just because there's less competition.
Right. Well, speaking of the market crash, you obviously flipped and worked right through that. Did you were you scared seeing the market crash?
Yeah, no, I was scared. And actually, a lot of people that I respected locally that had been flipping houses for a long time that I knew, were having discussions with me about how there was no shame in just going and getting a job, waiting to see, because nobody knew what was going to happen, right? Like at the time, you don't know where the bottom was, or like how far the values were going to sink. San Antonio was a little bit luckier, South Texas, because our values never went sky high through the roof. They went up, but they weren't crazy like a lot of other places. So they didn't really go down a whole lot either. Time on market, days on market for properties after fixing them up went up pretty high, and then plus, all of the appraisers being super careful. Said they were undervaluing everything. It was just insane. We get like 2 offers over asking price for a property, and they would still put the value like $5,000-$10,000 less. And it's like, why? We've got 2 people wanting to buy it immediately at that price, and you still put a lower value. But it was a tough time to sell properties.
Yeah, no, we went through the same thing here. Really similar, because our prices didn't skyrocket, like California or Arizona, some of those places. So we didn't have the huge drop, but it did definitely drop. And then, yeah, same exact thing with appraisers, multiple offers, over list price. And it was just crazy seeing them come in low. And what are you guys thinking? I know they had a lot of pressure on them from the regulators and everything.
Right. They became sort of the scapegoats, right? I mean, for all the, the overvaluing of properties, it was like, well, who are we going to blame? Well, let's blame the appraisers. So
right. Yep. And there were a few appraisers who made it a lot worse for most of the appraisers. So I don't know if you had it in your area, but we had a few subdivisions with massive fraud, new construction sites where the agent, a lender, an appraiser, and the builder were all working together.
Oh, I see you.
And they would find immigrants who couldn't speak English, basically give them a 6-month arm with super low payments, and then it would double in 6 months, and they're paying $100,000 more than the house was worth. Screwed over a lot of people in the whole industry. So you kept flipping. When you did your direct marketing, I know you did bandit signs, drive for dollars. Did you ever do direct mailing when you were doing that marketing techniques?
Right. So yeah, with the drive for dollars, we would send letters to the owners based on what the tax assessor's website where the tax bill was going. And then we also did absentee owner mailings. And I did some pre-foreclosure mailings just for a little bit, but that was, one of those things that was always being, after I'd gone to a couple sellers' houses with that, and they show you the stack of letters that they got.
Right.
It was like, wow, I'm going to find some other list to mail to, because there's, in that case, that you're probably better off going and knocking door to these pre-foreclosures to where you're talking to them, because otherwise you're one in 50 letters that they received. But other than that, no, I didn't do much direct mail. I did try billboards.
Oh, really?
For a couple of years, but they weren't the big ones. They were I guess you call them 9-sheet, I think. It was like a 5-foot by 7-foot billboards, and I had 15 of them around town. And I think that did more for, maybe I don't really try to brand so much, but my old Danny Buys houses.
Mm-hmm.
Something that, so when I talked to, real estate agents, things like that, they would always say, oh, I've seen your billboards, and kind of help with branding, but I didn't get enough deals to warrant the cost.
Right. What do you think was your best deal per cost marketing that you did?
Okay, so like which type of marketing got the most bang for the buck?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Let me see, over time, like driving for dollars always was pretty good. But then you've got to calculate your time. If you're not, if you're the one doing the driving and doing the envelopes and all that kind of stuff, you sort of need to add the cost in there. But without that cost added in, that always was always really good for us for cost per lead, cost per deal. The other thing was my website. I've got to be where it was the best thing that I was doing, cost per deal, cost per lead.
Cool. I know you're very focused on websites now, and obviously you have a software background, so that makes it a little easier for you. How did you promote your website? Did you advertise it? Did you just put it up and hope for Google to pick it up? How are you getting people to your website?
Yeah, so I've had a website for a long time, and I started it out with like a corporate sort of website. And so it was my company name, .com. And then I included that on my marketing. And I never really got a whole lot of leads through it. And I wanted to do more marketing that was more personable. So it was more about me being just a regular Joe, because I found that whenever I went to properties wearing like a t-shirt and jeans and things like that, it's, people seemed more comfortable and more relaxed and didn't have that wall up, where they were, because they don't know who you are. You're coming over and they see marketing, you talking about buying houses cash. They think they're going to have some high-powered salesperson come up to the house. And so I figured the marketing with the website, if I made it more personable, would be better. So I changed it to DannyBuysHouses.com. So I got that domain name, and I set it up, and I'd put it on my marketing. So I didn't put it on bandit signs, but I put it on letters, postcards, and things like that. And then like car magnets and stuff. And so I got some traffic from my mailing, because some people don't want to call somebody. They'd rather go online and find out more about you, especially when it was a less known thing to flip houses. Nowadays everybody knows about it. So it's nothing where they're asking like, I don't understand what you do. They all know because they've seen the shows. But, when it became more personable, I felt like there was a change in the amount of submissions I was getting. And I started looking into trying to get my website onto, the first page of the search engines on Google and everything. So I started looking at what I would need to do that, studying search engine optimization and everything. And I implemented that. And I remember doing everything I could read and find about it. And the site wasn't barely moving. And I remember being so frustrated. I mean, it wasn't just like a one-day thing. I mean, I spent like a month, in the evening, like sitting in bed till about 10 o'clock at night on my laptop, like doing all this stuff. And it didn't really budge. Well, and then so I sort of just, dropped it and got busy with the rehabs and stuff like that. I didn't turn the website off. I'm just saying I stopped trying to do all the optimization. Well, then I started getting quite a few leads, and I looked, and, after a couple months I looked, I was like, wow, look, I'm like on the first page, and I started, it took time. So it's never something, where you make changes and then the next day you're all of a sudden first. It'll never happen like that. And especially, whenever I started doing that, there was a lot less competition for it. So it was quicker. So it's still possible to rank websites and get them to the top, but it just takes time. And I think, this day and age, it's going to be several months if you're really focused and doing the right things to get a site up there. But sites are good for other things, other than just being ranked at the top. So like, being another way for people to contact you, another way for people to find out more about what you do, And it builds credibility for you, because if it's just they're getting some letter that's handwritten to you, there's some people that think that that's kind of creepy. It's like, what is this
Right.
about? Like somebody's written me some little letter saying they want to buy my house cash. Why? It's not for sale. So it gives you credibility. They can find out more about you and what you do and everything. And then you include it on your other marketing, so that whenever they submit the information through your website, you can have your website ask them all the questions you need to ask them. And I find that people will give you almost everything that you want from them. So, our websites have a short form where it just has where they submit their information, like their contact information and the property address. And so they don't see a huge form and freak out and say, I'm not filling out all that, so they fill out the short one, and then it takes them to the longer one. Some people won't fill out the longer one, but since they already submitted the shorter one, we now have the contact information and can contact them right away to get all that other information. But most people will fill out the second form. And the second form asks them certain questions in certain orders to get their level of motivation, and to also have it fresh in their mind why they're selling their house. And, it even does negotiating for us, because it asks, how much are you asking for the house? And a couple questions later, after we ask, well, why are you selling it? What repairs are needed? Then we ask, well, what's the least you would even consider for it if we paid cash? It blows my mind. Almost everybody will put, 5 to 10,000 less than what they put for the asking price. So it gets drilled down to a little bit more of, how much they're really, because most people don't know what to ask. So they ask something kind of high, just hoping.
Right.
And then, they'll put a lower one if they really are motivated to move on and have the deal closed quickly. The other thing that's nice about my website is I have it where it triggers a text. So before, if I got an email for a lead, if I didn't check my phone or have my phone check my email, like I didn't know I had that lead immediately. There's like a delay. So I have it texting me. As soon as I get a lead submitted, I get a text with their contact information. And so what that allows me to do is immediately, while they're still on my website and while they're likely looking at filling out that second long form, I'm calling them. And that's huge, because they're setting out to do something. They're setting out to take care of the problem that they have with their house. And if they call people and that people don't pick up the phone, likely a lot of times they won't leave a message. They're calling the next person. And so when they finally have somebody to talk to, and you talk to them right away and find out what the problem is, what they're wanting to do, how quick they're wanting to sell the house, and you set an appointment to see it, they feel like they've accomplished what they wanted to on their to-do list, and they can mark it off of their to-do list. And so they're likely not going to be calling a ton of people after that.
Right.
I find sometimes that even from the website, I'll call them and we'll set up an appointment, and I'll go and make an offer, and they won't be having anybody else coming to look at the house to make an offer. It was like I was the one. They wanted to see what I would do first, and then if it didn't work out, then they would start looking for other people. So you always want to be answering your phone and setting appointments and making the seller feel like they've accomplished what they set out to.
That I'm sitting here writing stuff down as you said that, so I can implement some of those things in my own marketing and website. And that's great information. And then one thing too, and we should have mentioned this earlier, but your website, flippingjunkies.com, you also have created this software for other people to use, right? So you can help them create their own web page to capture those leads, so they can do their own direct marketing and have their own website. Right.
So what it is I set up a blog called flippingjunkie.com. That's JUNKIE.com, Flipping Junkie. And what that was back in, I think it was 2010, 2011, my family and I went on a month-long trip up the whole entire West Coast from San Diego up to Seattle. I had gone to an air museum up there in Oregon and looking at the planes. And I had been up in a small plane with one of my mentors, a couple years before, and had a blast. I just loved it. So I always had it in the back of my mind. And I put it on my vision board that I wanted to become a pilot, get my private pilot license. So after that trip and going to the museum, I told my wife, I said, when we get back, I am scheduling for flight lessons. I'm just going to do it. And so when we got back from our trip, I scheduled flying lessons and started taking those. And while I did that, I was sort of playing semi-retired and wasn't really tending to the business too much, which was fine at first, because a lot of times when you're doing marketing for flipping houses, you sort of build up an accumulation of the marketing that's out there. There's people holding on to your letters and things like that they received even months before that still call you and things. So even if you're not doing a whole lot of marketing, if you've been doing it for a while, it still brings in calls even after you stop. And so that's what was happening. So I wasn't really worried about it. But then after like 3 months, the phone stopped kind of ringing. So it was sort of, the number of properties we had in our queue really dropped. And then it became like, whoa, I need to ramp this thing back up. And so I didn't want to, just sort of get back into what I was doing. I wanted to have fun with it and I wanted to teach other people. So I started flipping junkie and then started blogging about like ramping my business back up because it was like I was starting again. So I was able to post sort of the whole, what would you do if you had to start over? Because I felt like that's what I was sort of doing. And so I posted about 34 weeks of like every marketing that I did, every single lead that came in, why the people were selling, the numbers, how I decided which houses to go see and things like that. And so after the 34 weeks where I was tallying up which marketing produced X number of leads, it was very obvious that the vast majority of the leads came from my website. So everybody was asking me, hey, can you set up a website for me? And that wasn't really my business. I'm flipping houses and didn't have time to do that. And they would ask me where they could go to get one made. And I just didn't have anywhere to tell them. So you see where it's going. I ended up building leadpropeller.com, leadpropeller.com. And then we have the websites there where, from all the years of using a website, all that knowledge has gone into building these, and people can choose a template and easily customize it to make it their own and get it live and have the text come in when people submit leads to their website, all that kind of stuff.
No, I love the text idea. That's great. And then just the whole idea of the website is nice because you're getting someone to enter information before you talk to them. So it's not just a cold call. They know who you are. They're giving you information already. It just seems so much easier than just having to, talk to someone right off the bat without knowing anything about them or their house. And
oh yeah, yeah. And it's a little bit strange sometimes because I'll go to a house, from a lead submission from the website, and I'll go and visit the house and look at what repairs it needs and talk to the seller. And, they'll tell me that they felt really comfortable with me, like even before we showed up because of the website. It's like because I have, picture of my wife and daughter on there and stuff, because it's a family business and that's how we run it. We don't act like we're big shot salespeople going there high powered and strong arm people,
Right. No, that's great. Very cool. So yeah, leadpropeller.com, flippingjunkie.com. And then we've talked about flips and wholesaling. You also have rental properties as well. So I know your wife does most of the rental property, but tell us a little bit about your rentals, how you got into rentals, and are you trying to buy more of them? What's your plan?
All right. So rentals are interesting. I like the tax benefits of having rentals. I don't necessarily like having rentals though, at least when we don't have good tenants. When we have good tenants, it's not a problem. But, basically the first rentals that we got were just, basically like where we bought a house and somebody was already in it for 10 years. They had already been renting for a long time and said, well, they've been paying for this long and they're good tenants. I'll buy the house and just continue, I'll start getting the rent payments. And so those were the first ones. And then we also were doing owner financing. So we'd buy a house and these are like the lower end houses, right? I don't take houses that I can retail flip and turn them into rentals. Because here it just doesn't, like we have a high property tax.
Right.
Because we don't have a state income tax in Texas. So property taxes are higher. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense with the numbers on some of the retail houses that would get a retail loan on them, closer to the medium home values. And so it's usually the lower end ones that we have as rental properties that we sell with owner financing. Dodd-Frank came into the picture recently, and there's a whole lot of other things hoops you've got to jump through to qualify people and make sure that you're doing your part in qualifying them correctly. And it's not to say you can't do it, it's just more work. So we end up just renting them now instead of owner financing. And so we'll do that. And basically my whole rule which is actually something I got from my father, but one of, my rule basically for the rental sort of things is if I'm getting a loan to buy the property, I want the rent payment from the property to cover my loan payment and I have to have my loan payment amortized over no more than about 8 years, so that I'm not really cash flowing on rental properties, but they're paying off way quicker, and I'm paying a lot less interest. And so that's sort of like, the retirement stuff, so that's all sooner than later. I'm not waiting 30 years for, big cash flow.
Right. No, yeah, you definitely have to have some good numbers to cover 8-year amortizations.
Right. Yeah. You've got to get them pretty low.
Nice.
And that's why it works for the lower properties, because you get the higher rents, and the rents are, how relative the rent is to the cost of the house with the low rent stuff just makes more sense.
Right. With these properties and with these flips, how are you financing the properties? I know a lot of them some were wholesale deals in the beginning where you wouldn't have to finance them. Were you doing cash? Were you using banks? Or how were you financing some of the flips you were doing?
So private money. So when we first started, one of my mentors, we went into business working with him, and he put up the money for the deal. So we did all legwork. We found the deals. We put them under contract. We handled the rehabs, handled selling them, and we would split the profit 50-50. So that's, we got an education, and we also got, the money for the deal. So that's how we started. And then after doing enough deals, several dozen deals, we ended up putting together like a little packet. And what I did was I looked up the county's website, where you can look up recorded deeds and things like that. So I was looking at properties that sold recently on the MLS that were fixer-uppers, like investor-type properties. And then I looked up the deed records online, and I looked for ones that had a note, because then that was like another, investor got a loan to buy the house, the investment property. And so I'd write down who the lender was. And a lot of times it's, like a private person. And so after writing down enough of those, you start to see names come up more often than not. Like you see some that come up more often, and so they're lending quite a bit of money. And so you have to check with the SEC rules, Securities and Exchange Commission, I think, about soliciting for somebody to lend you money. So definitely don't just, do that and find, an address for them and mail to them saying, hey, can I borrow 100,000? Like there's rules that you've got to follow. You can't just send these guys letters that have certain information. Check with an attorney, of course. But I think it's like you can't write to them about a specific deal, I think. And then I would never, you can't pool money either. You can't get several investors to put money in on a deal, I don't think. So it's more of like, one investor per property, where they're just the lender, they get a note and a deed of trust and sort of thing. So, but check with an attorney before you go sending mail to try to get people to lend on your deals.
Yeah, no, I've never actually thought of that idea of searching for flip deals and then seeing who the lender was. That's really smart idea. There's always, go ahead.
Oh no, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, people are always looking for private money, and if you don't have a rich uncle or rich parent, it's kind of hard to approach people, but that's brilliant, because they're already lending on real estate and flips. So, they know what's going on. It's just a matter of, do they want to keep lend to other people too?
Right. Yeah. And while you're looking on those, if there's not a note and deed of trust, there's not a recorded loan, then they probably paid cash. And then you've got a cash buyer, whoever bought that house was a cash buyer. So you have them for wholesale deals.
Yep, exactly.
You want to hold something out, you've got somebody, and I found some of my best wholesale buyers that way. You send a letter saying, hey, I know she bought this property, you want to buy more? And they'll call you up. Of course I do. So I found some of my best, buyers that way. Because with wholesaling, whenever I do wholesaling, typically I'm only contacting one or two people. I don't do mass emails. I don't do all that stuff, because I don't want to deal with a bunch of people calling me a bunch of questions about how old the roof is. I just want to call somebody, tell them the price, the address, and then that's it. They tell me if they want it or not.
Right.
And you do that by finding out who the real players are, who can handle a bunch of deals and make a decision quickly. I could probably make more if I did try to find other investors to maybe buy, but it's so much more work. And then I don't know if they're really going to be able to close at the end of it.
Right. Just add more headaches.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's a wholesaler around here who just started working, and I think her strategy to start out with, she's an agent, was she emailed everybody on the MLS her wholesale deal.
Oh, wow.
Agent. I'm like, wow, that's gutsy, but I don't think it's working very well because the houses I see are advertised keep coming back on the market.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The time taken. Yeah. It's like a big wholesale buyers list, versus one that has 5 of the best buyers in town. I mean, which one would you take? I'll take the short one.
Right. Every
So,
time.
so yeah, take the time to try to meet and find the people. And that's really a lot of times just calling like you see bandit signs, call them up,
Right.
chat a little bit. What do you do? Where do you buy? So on and so forth. And then like, hey, who's buying a lot right now? And after asking enough people, you're going to hear some same names. And all of a sudden you already know, who the real deal people are.
Yep. Sure. Very cool. Well, I think we've covered most of the things that I wanted to cover in this call. Great information. Before we end this, what's your advice? I know your father helped you, but he didn't really take your hand and guide you along the way. He kind of pointed you in a direction and said, go find your way. I mean, to me, I think that's probably one of the best educations you can get instead of someone telling you exactly what to do. But for people who want to start flipping, I mean, what's some advice you can give them to get started, especially in a market like we have where we're, in most areas of the country, we're back to a hot seller's market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that'll change eventually. Nothing, it's all in cycles. I think the best advice is sort of, along the lines of the whole, don't take my hand and show me step by step, but, learn enough of the basics, but don't spend all your time trying to cover every single possibility because you're never going to, and you're never going to start if you're staying in your comfort zone and using that as your excuse. I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle every situation. Well, guess what? You're never going to be able to. There's still situations I come across I don't know how to handle, and I just figure it out. So the thing is to just learn the general rules of the game and then start taking action, going ahead and putting marketing out there and getting the call and seeing what happens. The first call I ever got, my phone rang, and I actually had to throw it to my wife. She had to take the call. I couldn't even take that first call. I was too nervous. And she didn't know what to ask, so she just asked for the address and the phone number and maybe how many bedrooms and bathrooms. And, and then I ended up calling them back. But, everybody starts out at the same place. They hear all these stories about people's success and everything and think it was just all of a sudden they started doing well and they never stumbled. It's like everybody goes through the tough points. And if you're not passionate about getting into the business, then you probably won't do what it takes because it does take getting out of your comfort zone. And one of the analogies with that is like of just focusing on what that first step is so you don't get overwhelmed, like the first step of putting marketing out there to get calls. Is I forget who gave this analogy. It was probably something like Jim Rohn or somebody, but it's like whenever you're driving at night from like San Antonio to Chicago, it's like you don't need headlights on your car. They're going to illuminate the entire path all the way to Chicago, right? You just need headlights that get you illuminate the 500 feet in front of your car or whatever. So, and then as you drive, those headlights adjust to, 500 feet further down the road. And so that's how you sort of look at it. You learn enough to illuminate what's right in front of you, what you need to do right now, and then progress.
That's awesome advice. So one thing I think that people can really take away too is, like you said, if someone's looking for a mentor, they want a partner or someone to teach them what they're doing, you can't just show up to them and say, hey, teach me everything you know. I'll work hard for you. Yeah. I mean, as somebody who's successful, it's like, well, I don't want to think of a job. I don't need to train someone and think of a new job for someone. Like you said, if you can bring someone a deal and say, hey, look, I have this house we can make money on. I just need funding. Then you're going to get a partner. Then you're going to get someone who will work with you. But you have to bring value to the table, something that will motivate them because, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to mentor someone and teach them even just part of the flipping game or wholesale game. It's a lot of work.
Right. And then, people are being asked all the time for people to help them out. So what sets you apart from them? If you have leads, I guarantee you it's going to set you apart. It's a mistake most people make. They will contact you and ask, for you to be their mentor and say, but I'm willing to give too. Just tell me, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Well, that doesn't help me because it makes me try to think of something for you to do. And I've got things taken care of. I don't need, bring me some leads, Yeah. Okay.
Very cool. Well, Danny, I appreciate it. Great job. Again, flippingjunkie.com is your main site with the blog. You also have, I know, a wholesaling program on there as well. Leadpropeller.com is where people can get a website basically created for them to bring leads to them. Anything else I'm missing? Oh, REI Mobile. Tell us real quick a little bit about that.
And REI Mobile is basically a cloud-based CRM system for all your leads to manage all your leads. So whenever I first started flipping houses, being a developer, I started coding sort of a system, keep track of all my leads. Because an important part of it, especially now with how competitive everything is, it's the people that follow up or the people getting deals. Because a lot of times you won't go to a house, make an offer, and have them accept it. A lot of times they're waiting for other offers or just not ready to make a decision right then. So if you have some sort of system to remind you to contact them 2 days from now, 3 days from now, and then set it on autopilot for remembering all of these contacts you make and all the offers to follow up, to be that person that's always calling them. When they finally do decide to sell, you're going to be the first person that comes to mind because you were contacting them. I think a lot of too many investors will make an offer and then not get it and assume that they sold it to somebody else, when a lot of times it's not the case, but they never follow it up to find out. And so that system helps you do that and keep track of marketing and things like that. The software is in beta version right now. We just released it recently. So you can check it out and see what it's all about on the website there.
Very cool. Yeah, that's another great point. Any kind of marketing, sending out one letter, making one phone call probably is not going to get the job done. It takes persistence, multiple letters, multiple attempts. And yeah, you can't give up on people. You just got to keep working at it over and over and over again.
Right.
All right. Great. Well, thank you very much, Danny. We'll have links to your websites on the page if people want to go there. And then appreciate your time. Lots of great information. Like I said, I was sitting down here writing notes for myself too. So I think I learned a lot as well. So,
I appreciate you having me on, Mark.
Oh yeah. Thanks a lot. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. All right. Take care.